Hello, everyone. As you guys are joining in, we just want to welcome you to our PD program annual performance reporting webinar. As folks are coming in, I just encourage you to make sure that you can locate your chat box. If you like to come off mute and ask some questions, those are just some handy tools for you guys throughout our webinar today. We will also be having some fun quizzes and polls and some time to share too if you have questions. So just make sure that you are able to do that. As we are waiting for folks to come in, we want to welcome any new project directors out there, those that are maybe this is this is your rodeo, you know what to do. We welcome you all. Also encouraging you guys to please share any tips or tricks that you've learned over the years of doing this for new project directors that are joining. So before we dive deep into a lot of information today, we will review our disclaimer. Sorry, guys.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
So now that we have reviewed our disclaimer, for those in the chat, I would love if you guys popped in where you're Zooming from. I know that some of us are experiencing some sunny days, maybe some snow. For me, some rain. So just really curious to see where you guys are coming from. So today, as you see on the screen, here's an overview of our topics and flow for today. We will go over the reporting requirements and some changes that hopefully will make the experience for you all a lot easier on your end as we are going through our systems today. So throughout this webinar, we discussed also earlier in previous talking circles that G5 moved to G6. And so we're going to refer to it as G6 today, but just note that inside the system, they're still transitioning. So you may see G5, you may see G6. Just know that they're the same website and the same system, and your login is still the same. So as we are moving forward today, just a reminder, and please write this date down, write the time change down, because your APR is due on March 29th, but G6 is very strict with time deadlines. And so the system will close at 4:30 Eastern time on the day. And so after 4:30 hits, you will not be able to go in and submit your APR through G6. So we just encourage you to just take a screenshot, write this down, put a reminder in your phone about this time, because it is 4:30 that the system will shut down and close if you are inside trying to report and put in your APR. I wanted to also note and thank you to Sarah for putting in the time putting in the note in the chat. Please keep in mind of the time zone. It's 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. So for those in other time zones, it could be even earlier in the day. So just remember to please keep that time in mind. And we also wanted to give you just a timeline and due date for your APRs. And so your APR is due March 29th before 4:30. End of your grant year is August 2nd. And then your APR update is due September 12th. And so G6 is open for you to begin entering information beginning the 1st of March. But some of you may already started collecting your data. And so we kind of just wanted you to see the timeline and see what you have to do this year. The thing that we wanted to kind of mention now is that the system will cut off sometimes, or like randomly log you out. And so as we are going through this webinar today, and as you are collecting your data, we highly suggest you to kind of report your information or write the data down in a separate spreadsheet. So when you do go in the system, you can copy and paste it easily, and you have it saved in case of any technical difficulties. And later in this webinar, we will be dropping in any the G6 help desk phone number and email if you don't have it already. Okay, and so just going over the purpose of your APR, the APR is a federal grant requirement, and it is the primary document submitted annually that allows you to document your progress towards project objectives. And we'll talk about later on in this webinar too the importance of these of the APRs and how you report can impact your years to come. So we use what you say to determine progress. And this information will inform a continuation award decision. So in the chat, our TA team is going to drop in an APR checklist. And the APR checklist is a document that has all the information you will need to complete each section of the APR. It goes through every single section, those that are required that you must submit, and those that are optional and additional information. So we encourage you to go ahead and download it now so you have it and you can refer to it throughout this webinar. And so we just wanted to kind of highlight some changes, like I said in the beginning, in the system that will help you all report your GEPRA measures, your project measures, your program measures a lot easier, and it'll be easier for you to submit your documents. And so if you have or you have had any other grants in the past, you know that PD reporting is different. Not only do you have to report and input your data in the PD PCS system, but we also are requiring you to report it inside G6 as well. And so the slight change this year is that your data not your data, but your GEPRA measures, your project measures, and your program measures are already in the system. They're pre-populated in there. So all you're responsible for doing is inputting the numerator, the ratios, the data. And so that is one change that you will experience this year, is that you will see that your exact wording is already in there. So we just wanted to just remind you of your GEPRA measures that you will be reporting on, and then also your program and project measures as well. And so just to note again that when you go in the system, you will see that your GEPRA and program measures are already in G6, and you will need to input your data and also the wording for your project measures. And now I will turn it over to your program officer, Linda, to go over more information about reporting for your measures on this year's APR.
Hi, welcome everybody. So just as a little reminder, we'll get more into these later on in the slideshow this afternoon, that you do have 6 different GEPRA measures. Remember, they will be pre-populated. They're already in there. So you cannot change any of the wording that is included in there. We're going to go over a little bit later. If you're an administrator training program, then you have 4 of these 6. And if you're a teacher training program, then you also have a different 4 of these 6 GEPRAs to measure on. The first 4 are looking for a percentage. So we're asking you to use that ratio time frame out of 100 to go ahead and list those 4. And then the final 2 GEPRA measures are in fact dollar amounts, where you can go ahead, and you are the only ones who are familiar with what actual tuition, room and board, books cost for your program. So you will have to enter that raw number in each of your GEPRA measures for those. And I know a lot of you might not have that information right now because it isn't yet to the end of your programs, and we'll tell you what to do in those situations too. But I know a lot of you often reach out to me and wonder if we can increase the stipend amount. And as you know, that is set in our regulations right now to be capped at that $1,800. But if your colleges and universities are a whole lot more than that $1,800, I think that would be better justification for us. So definitely don't inflate the cost of your programs, but be sure you're giving it an accurate representation. And that's why also PDCS can't go ahead and collect this GEPRA measure for you, because while they do know how much students are responsible for paying back, they don't know the actual cost for each of your individual universities. So those are our GEPR measures that will already be listed. And then PD also has those very unique program measures. Remember, in each of your applications, you have listed the projected number of participants that you plan to recruit, the projected number of participants who will be continuing in your programs from year to year, the projected number of participants that you expect will graduate, and the projected number of participants that will find qualifying employment within 12 months of finishing their requirements. So to report on those, we want both those projections and the actual numbers that projected that you were able to go ahead and recruit. So those will also be pre-populated on your data collection pages for you to go ahead and report on. And I'm going to turn it back over to Doris, and I'll speak to you a little later.
And so this is the landing page for the G6 system where you submit your APR. Just a few notes that we wanted to provide you is to please be aware of the scheduling of the site. Sometimes the site will be closed for updates and maintenance, and so that's a really good time to pre-plan when you want to submit your data. We always encourage you to submit it well before the deadline. So just in case if anything does happen, it doesn't hinder you from being able to submit it on time. Like we said in the chat, please be mindful of the time zone when these system updates are scheduled, and when your APR deadline is due, just be mindful of the time zone. We also wanted to bring your attention to the help desk information and options for reaching the help desk. You can call them, you can email them. We highly encourage you to write this down. If you don't have it, put a sticky note on, because it could be really helpful in the times when you are trying to submit your things. We also wanted to just bring you to what it looks like when you are trying to log in. And so you do have these two options, and we just find it best to just log in using the top option, so you are able to still access your G6. And in the chat, we encourage you to make sure you still have access today. Please don't wait until it's at the end of March and you are having a little bit of trouble getting in, because then that's the time of you getting your APR and may be delayed if you don't have access. And if you do not have access, please reach out to them and double check as well. So we're going to go through the reporting forms today, and we're going to post these in the chat as we go through them so it's easier for all of us to follow along, especially going over the few changes in the system. And so we just wanted you to be sure that the expiration date on the top of your form is current. Please check that it reads for this current year and you are not submitting a form that is from 2023, 22, or 21. And if you're unsure about the form that you have, you can always visit the link on the top of the screen, on the bottom of the screen, and in the chat to obtain the most up-to-date copy. And we will also post the current forms in the chat too, if you want to download them and follow along and take notes as we're going through them today. And we will also post this recording on YouTube if that is something that you want to follow along at a later date as well. We will walk through each of these required sections, which include your cover sheet, your executive summary, sections A, B, and C. We wanted to highlight that the 5 bullet points you see on the screen are mandatory. They are a must. And we are also going to provide some additional optional tools and resources for you to submit along with your APR. But the 5 you see on the screen are a must. They are what you are required to report on. And I also wanted to note that in this year's APR update, you will notice that previously you were able to upload your cover sheet and executive summary in the same place, but this year you will have two separate uploading options to submit both your cover sheet and your executive summary separately. So you have that option as well in there. So don't upload them together. You upload your cover sheet and then you upload your executive summary. Okay, so this is a screenshot of the cover sheet, and you will need a new cover sheet for this APR. Again, please make sure you're using the most up-to-date form that is in the upper right-hand corner of the cover sheet. And so this line item 1 is where you will put your unique APR number. Sorry, your PR number, not your APR number. This is where you put your PR number. And just to make sure that you include the full number for your grant, especially for those that have multiple grants, this could be a little tricky where you have to submit multiple APR. So just make sure that you're putting the correct PR number. And then moving on to line item 7, this is where you will enter the full reporting period for your grant. So please enter the dates you see on the screen from August 3rd to February 29th. And then in line item 8, it's about the budget periods contained in the APR. And there are 3 line items. And although 8A and 8C are both left blank, and this is not used at the time. So in 8B is the single current budget period, and it corresponds with the reporting period in item 7. And so we just wanted to note that in line item 8B, please reflect what you have actually spent, not what you're planning to spend, but what has been spent at the end of the reporting period. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to pop in the chat or come off mute as well. And we'll also have time in between each section for questions. So moving along to your APR, in item 9, just be sure that you're entering the most up-to-date indirect cost information, because sometimes these expire or other details change with the renewals. And so please just double check that you are using the correct information and do not skip it. In item 10, it asks about human subjects in IRB, and you are able to, and you can check non-applicable. And lastly, in item 11, it's very important to click yes on it. And it also is including the corresponding policy and evidence that these securities are in place. And I see that we have a question in the chat asking why we are leaving the previous period blank. Belinda or Sarah, are we able to provide that answer?
Typically, because this is not the first year of the grant, previous period 8A would be completed with the amount drawn down in the previous grant year.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so moving on to the back of your cover sheet, there are 2 important details to note here. The first important detail to note is number 12 is about performance measure status. So in 12A for your annual performance report, you will be indicating yes or no for the question about complete data. So if you click yes, then you're stating that you have all the needed data to fully report on all of your project measures. And if you're clicking no, then it means you're stating that maybe the data is not available, or you are still collecting that data, or you're not too sure about the data, or you just don't have the data. So you would click no. And so, for example, if you have maybe one measure that you can't input the data because the graduates, they're graduating in May. And we're requiring you to have it done at the end of March. So you would put a 999 in there when you're reporting in section A. And so you would click no here because you don't have that data just yet. And finally, on your cover sheet, we wanted to make sure that you have the signature of your authorized representative. And we understand that sometimes the project directors sign this, but we want to make sure that the project director is not your authorized representative. And we've had in the past that maybe your authorized representative has changed and you want to inform your program officer, please do so, so we can make sure that the signatures are correct and up to date. But if you have any troubles experiencing uploading your cover sheet or any parts of your APR, you are able to email them directly to Linda, your program officer. And so we will drop her email as well in the chat if you experience any trouble doing so. And so now the fun part, we will turn it over to Olani for quiz time.
Hi, everyone. It's Olani. So at every sort of end of a major section of information that both Doris and Linda will be sharing with you, we're going to do a little quiz time, take a little moment to just make sure we're going to check your understanding. And so let's get into the first question. All right, so here's the scenario. You have 10 participants who will find qualifying jobs within 12 months of completion. Participants graduate in May of 2024. Okay, so think about that scenario. And there should be, there you go. There's the quiz popping up there. Okay, so given your reporting due dates of March 29th, what is the appropriate response for item number 12? Are complete data or performance measures for the current budget period included in the project status chart in the following scenario? That's item 12. So why don't you go ahead and put in whether you would, whether you're going to select yes or no. All right, looks like we have everyone participating, and the answer, oh, here comes some more, sorry. Few more coming in. All right, so you should be indicating yes or no for item 12, and the correct answer, I saw it there, peeked out, should be no. So the data is not available yet. Again, your participants aren't graduating until May of 2024. And so probably in your section A, you are denoting either, let's see, when is you are either denoting 999 or 0/1. And so you don't, or actually 999, so you don't have all the complete data yet. Okay, awesome. Great job, you guys. Okay, moving on to the next quiz question. Question number 2. So let's take a look at this scenario again. So 90% of your participants will continue in the project each year. Your semester ends in May 2024. Hiring decisions about participants working in a qualified location are made throughout the summer. Okay, so again, given your reporting due dates of March 29th, what is the appropriate response for this grantee to item 12? And item 12's question is, are complete data on performance measures for the current budget period included in the project status chart in the following scenario? All right, so we'll let everybody get their answers in. Okay. So let's take a look at what the answer, what the appropriate response should have been. Okay, so again here, you would say no, because data will not be available until August 2024. Awesome job, you guys. And I'll see you at the end of the next section.
All right, so now it's time for a few reporting pro tips. So we'll be popping in throughout your time today with just a few reminders of things that will hopefully make for a more successful reporting season. So my first top tip for your cover sheet is, as soon as you're done with this webinar, send an email over to your budget office and let them know that on March 1st, you need the G5 drawdown report, because that's going to be really important to both your cover sheet and later to your section B. And so if you go ahead and put in that request now, then hopefully you can get it pretty early in March so that you're not being held up in your reporting later. So give them a heads up that you're going to need that on March 1st and the time period, your reporting period from August 3rd to February 29th. Top tip 2, work on your cover sheet first as soon as possible so that you can print that out and get it to your authorized representative for a signature. One of the probably the most common cause for a grantee submitting their APR late is because they were unable to secure the authorized representative's signature by the deadline. You can avoid this by getting them to sign it now while you continue working on the full report. And then top tip number 3, check that your indirect cost rate has not expired. Just double check, even if you think it hasn't. Just take a peek and make sure, because you want to make sure that Linda has your unexpired indirect cost rate documentation on hand, because if the documentation she has your indirect cost rate expired, you won't be able to make drawdowns. And I know you need the money. So make sure and just double check that. See you after the executive summary.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah and Olani. So moving on to our executive summary and just some notes that we want to give you. And so you will have 1 to 2 pages to provide a narrative description of your program's accomplishments and highlights. So think about your project goals, think about the intended outcomes, and describe them. Describe the extent to which your program was able to accomplish these things or not, and provide a rationale as to why not, and include those lessons learned and insights gained along the way. Or maybe you're able to overcome a challenge and you accomplished it in a different way. We want to know and hear why and how well it came out for you. And also, if your project goals and objectives were not actually met, please provide them in this section as well. And let us know, what affected your project implementation. So for example, if you experience some really high turnover, or some participants experienced some difficulties during their school year and are taking a semester off or taking a break, we want to hear that in your executive summary as well. But lastly, in your executive summary, OIE wants to know about what contributions your project was able to make. Did it impact research? Did it impact knowledge? Any practices or policies, things that you may have learned from your program evaluation, or trends that you have documented along the way? We would love to hear that as well. And so, like I mentioned before, please develop, just another pro tip, developing your executive summary in another document, whether it's Microsoft Word, whether it's your Notepad app, Google Drive, whatever form and platform you use. We highly recommend you developing it in another platform, giving yourself time to write it and craft it, edit it, and revise it, because G6 does time out and it will not save your work. And so we are very adamant about drafting it somewhere else, so you can just quickly copy and paste it into your executive summary. We also want to note that please do not copy and paste your narrative from section A, or vice versa. We want to make sure that this is an overview, a quick glance on how you have been doing and how your participants have been doing and your program has been doing. So just wanted to mention again, when you go in this time, if you are a returner, that you will see 2 separate spots for you to upload your cover sheet and your executive summary. So just wanted to remind you guys that as well. So we wanted to kind of look at an example of an executive summary, so you kind of know the flow and how to draft it. And so again, please make sure that your PR number is at the top. And if you manage multiple grants, please make sure that you are choosing your PD PR number. So at the top of this summary example, you will see that the project director opened up with a very short overview of the goal of the project and the completion towards that goal. So it's really important that you give us a quick snapshot. Next, the project director took some time to highlight the achievements and the progress toward the project goals and data. And lastly, you can see here that they mentioned they had a few late hires, which impacted and had some challenges as well. And they gave a detailed rationale for their actions. And so we highly encourage you to show us and format it in a way where we can listen to your story while you're telling your story. And so as we continue to review this example, we can see that the project director has included information that shares that they will not meet a project measure, that, for some reason, whatever happened in the late hiring, they did not meet project measure 3. And so they gave a detailed rationale providing to give context why and what happened. And so they also said that this was a setback and they have a plan on how they're going to overcome and get back on track. We want to see that in your executive summary as well. Moving forward, you can also see in the executive summary that they provided some impact, some data, and showed how participants are increasing, how their numbers are increasing. We want this to be a quick snapshot of the great things you have been doing, so we would love to see that as well. And lastly, we see that the grantee has concluded their summary by stating their next steps towards their goals, towards any measures they have not met or they're still waiting to complete. We also encourage you that this is a really great place to add any information or goals that you have related to sustainability. How are you going to, what are you guys going to do to provide support for your students, your program after the grant year has done? Just looking at the chat to see if we missed anything. Yes, we will absolutely, we will share the video. We always upload our videos to YouTube, and we'll make sure that we share that out on your PD Padlet as well. Are there any other questions that I missed before we head to quiz time? Okay, Alani, back to you.
It's me again. It's quiz time again. So we have 2 short questions, and let's just move right into it. So our first question, as it relates, again, just to the executive summary, how many pages should the executive summary include? You should see that quiz popping up on your screen. Go ahead and select your answer. Wait a couple more seconds for everybody to get their answer in. All righty. The correct answer is it should be anywhere between 1 and 2 pages. 2 pages is the maximum. Okay. Great. So let's move on to the next question. Question number 4. All right, here's a little scenario. So you missed one of your targets for a project goal. Excuse me. Which of the following action do you take in the executive summary? You'll have 3 choices. You select which one you think is the best choice. The first one is A, write 999 because you need more data. B, talk about the project goal, but do not go into detail because you can do that later in another part of the document or another part of the APR report. And C, discuss the project goal and include a brief rationale for why you missed the target. All right, we got people. Oh, this is great. So the correct answer should be B. You will share the challenges you are experiencing and the impact on your project measures but you can go into detail on the specific measure in section A. Again, you can, you'll have space in section A under explanation of progress. All right, I'll hand it off to Sarah.
All right, just a few tips for your executive summary. The first is actually follow the page limit. So stick to that 2-page limit. Now, that doesn't mean we want 2 sentences. That's not quite enough info. But if you have more than will fit on 2 pages, that's totally fine. Just move that other information down into section C. Top tip 2, do not repeat section A. We read so many of these, and Linda's going to be plugging through all these reports. She doesn't need you to just put the exact same info in 2 different places. This executive summary is really meant to be exactly what you'll see in tip 3, which is as if you're sitting down to tell someone, how have the last 6 months of your program been going? So act like you're sitting down for coffee with Linda and she asks you, so how's the first half of the year gone? And then write that in your executive summary. So not just a recap of section A. We've got your section A, but a nice overview of your program for the last 6 months. Catch Linda up on the good and the not so good. She wants to know it all. On to section A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah and Alani. So before we move on to section A, and this is where we will answer those questions you guys have been putting in the chat about 999 versus 0 versus leaving things maybe blank. And so we wanted to answer, are there any questions about the cover sheet or executive summary that folks may have? Feel free to pop them in the chat or come off of mute. Awesome. Okay. So now I'm going to pass it over to your program officer, Linda Brake, to talk more about section A today.
Okay, section A is where you're able to report the data on each of your objectives. You'll notice that on the screen, there is a form at the top and a form at the bottom. Both of those forms contain the same information. The top one is what you'll see in G5. The bottom form is the paper copy. And Casey was kind enough to put the paper copy in the chat if you want to download that and open it as we discuss it here. So this is the bulk of the information that you will submit on each of your objectives in your annual performance report or APR. The purpose of the project status chart is to demonstrate your progress that your project has made toward each of the objectives in your grant application. So the first type of objective we'll talk about are those GEPRA measures. Remember at the beginning of the webinar, we went over that there are 6 of them. Under the measure type, it will already have them listed as GEPRA in that red circle. They've been pre-populated, so they will be listed at the top there under the project objective. And then down in the performance measure is where you will actually go into detail about your performance that you were able to make on that GEPRA measure. We talked about that already. And some of the GEPRA measures will not apply to you based upon the route that you have taken in your application. Some of you are just teacher training, some of you are admin training, and some of you are both. So if a GEPRA measure doesn't apply to you, we're just going to leave it blank. Many in the past have been putting in a 0 because it didn't apply to you. But then we always wanted to go back and say, hey, now it's time for you to have some actual data. So if you leave it blank, then we'll know that GEPRA measure does not pertain to you at all. In looking at the GEPRA measures again, if you are an administrative grantee, then you are going to report on GEPRA 1, which is the percentage of participants in the administrator preparation project who go on to become administrators in an LEA that serves a high proportion of Indian students. You're going to address 3, how many of them completed state licensure requirements. You're going to complete 4, how many, what percentage of the program participants complete the service requirements. On schedule, you're going to complete number 5, which is the cost per administrator to complete your program. And if you have teachers training, then you are going to report on GEPRA 2, 3, 4, and 6. And I just saw in the chat where if you are not allowed to leave it blank, you can go ahead and put in the 0 or leave it blank, but you have to go ahead and put some rating score in there. So you can leave the performance measure blank, but you have to have some type of qualitative data. So you can put a 0 over 1. So thank you for that in the chat. And then the next slide are those program measures that we talked about earlier. They are going to be pre-populated at the top. And then you're going to go ahead and select that they are our program measures. If we look at the next slide, there are those 4 that are listed there, and you're going to be listing projected numbers and actual numbers for each of those. So if we look at the next project status chart will be your individual project measures, which were included in your grant application. And those are specific to your grant. So you will have to go ahead and copy and paste those into the form and put them at the top there where it asks you to list your objectives. And then you can go ahead, select your measure type and the target and the actual performance, if that's in fact how they were gone ahead and written in your application. Remember that we are only asking for progress on objectives that occurred during this reporting period, which you already know was August the 3rd of last year until February the 29th of 2024. And that we need to have APR data on the GEPRA measures, the 4 program measures, and however many project measures you had included. So that's a lot of data. I think PD has more than any other program currently in OIE. But you should have 4 of the 6 GEPRAs, 4 programs, and then however many project goals you included in your application. Data that is unavailable should be denoted as 999. And if the data will not be available or doesn't exist by the last day of your grant year, then you will report it as a 0 or a 0 over 1. Oh, there's actually a tie for the most required measures. ACE also has a lot. I thought you guys were winning, but I guess this is one time when it's good to have a tie. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how we'd like you to rate each of the different types of measures that we have. For GEPRA measures, we want you to go ahead and enter the actual number or the percentage. So some of these GEPRA measures may not apply to you depending on whether you're the teacher or the administrator. But you'll notice here that we have two different examples of GEPR measures on our chart. The first one deals with the cost, and some of you are doing the cost of your teacher training and some of the cost of your administrator preparation program. But what you want to do there is go ahead and list the actual raw number. That will be a dollar amount. So put your dollar symbol and any, anything that's applicable to that, but you can just list the number. If you're dealing with a GEPR measure that is a percentage, then we want you to use the percentage data to report that out on. So, the percentage that completed their service requirement could be out of 15 and you had 14 that would be out of 100 and you had 14 that completed. So that's 14% of your program. So just go ahead and list that percentage in there. If we look at our program measures, because you are asked to list the target, projected, and the actual, we'll need you to have two different data points there. One goes under the target and one is under the actual performance data. So the first example is we have the number of participants to be recruited. And let's say on your application, you wanted to complete, you had the target that you would recruit 20, and actually you were only able to recruit 18. So you would put 20 as the target and 18 as the raw number. In the second example, the number of participants to continue each year, we'd like that to be given to us using a ratio. So out of the 20 or out of the 18 that you actually recruited, 16 of those were continuing, were the actual number you had continuing, meaning that you had two not that are not completers. And then finally, with your project measures, it's a little harder to look at those because you each wrote very different project objectives, but you can go ahead and use the targeted number, actual number, but those are going to be unique to your program, so those won't be pre-populated anywhere for you to share. Just be sure that you do, in fact, include all of your project measures in your data, whether you are able to have data right now or if it will come at the end of the year or at the completion of your project. Just be sure that you do go ahead and include all of those. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Doris.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we have a question in the chat. What if you withdrew a participant and they are no longer active in the PDPDCS system? Are they considered in the mix for continuing?
No, if you withdrew them as a participant, they are not included in your, they are still included in your target, but they would not be in your actual performance data because they are no longer continuing in the program.
Thank you for that. And so we just wanted to give us, oh, sorry.
There's another question in the chat, and I'm not sure the answer, but I think Sarah may know. If they enter a ratio, does the system calculate it to a percentage?
Yes. So you just pop that ratio in the numerator and the denominator. Most of the denominators for the required measures have been done by Linda already. And that system is going to magically pop you up a nice little percentage.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're just going to go through a screenshot of what your project status chart may look like when your measures are entered. So here are two examples of a project measure all PD grantees are required to report. The first top example is a project measure that all grantees are required to report on the number of participants recruited into the program each year. And so in this case, in this example, the PD project will recruit 20 participants into the program each year. So just a reminder that if you will use the exact wording from your previous APRs. And we have also written in the chat that if you do not have access to those previous APRs, please reach out to your program officer and we will be sure to get those to you. But just be mindful that your program officer, Linda, not only is over STEP, but also over our AIR. Am I correct, Linda, or am I mixing up programs? But Linda is over a few
Yep.
other grants, and
That's
so
mine.
Yeah, well, and Linda, we can help alleviate a little of that congestion for you too. And if folks want to email the OIE email account, we can help send them their APRs so that you don't get too inundated.
absolutely. And so if you have requested your APRs, please be sure to CC both Linda and the OIE team so we can get you those APRs for you. And so just moving along that, in the second example at the bottom, you will also see a sample of a unique project measures, which reads, the PD project will conduct twice monthly induction service activities, August through June. And so just remember that we want to make sure that your measures are the same from the last year. So this is a really great point throughout this time to check if you have them. So moving on to the project measure types, please make sure that when you are putting in your project objectives, you are clicking to make sure that it says project. And if you are reporting on your program types, please make sure you are putting program. And so we are, if you have, I know that may be confusing, but like Linda said in the beginning, everyone has the 4 same program measures, but everyone's project measures are going to be different. So we want to make sure that you are indicating the correct type. And so, like mentioned before, enter the target number of the performance measures. And so you will see as well that we want you to, how they're split into 2 to input the target as well, and then enter the actual number for the performance. We recommend not the ratio, but putting in the actual numbers. And like Sarah said in a few seconds ago, when you put these numbers in, it should auto, populate what those percentages are for you. And so the most important part and the fun part for us, because we get to read your APRs, is your explanation of progress for both, for whether it's 1A, 1B, or you have 1C, 1D. This is where you will share examples of your progress and what happened, why are these numbers, if you lost a participant. This is a great place to also talk more about each individual measure. And so, Sarah and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I wanted to indicate that a new change this year is that there'll be 1 measure per page.
That is our hope. One of the joys of G5/G6 is that when Linda's setting up her reporting, it doesn't really look the same way it looks for y'all on the other end. So sometimes there's some fun surprises, but our intent is that that would be 1 per page to make it easier for you to have spots for your explanation of progress.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then I see a question in the chat. For example 2, wouldn't the raw number be 999 because the data is not final yet for the year? I want to say yes. This is just one example of if you don't have the data and the data, you won't get it until June, then it will be 999. But we just wanted to show what it would look like if you had the complete data inside your project status chart. And so we really wanted to talk more about the explanation of progress and what we are looking for, and just some tips and tricks on how to provide detailed explanations of your whys. So when you are writing your explanation of progress, you will want to provide both quantitative and qualitative data that gives your program officer insight, not only whether or not your goals were met, but provide insight about the background and context under which you're operating as well. We want to hear the challenges, what happened. A lot of us may still have impacts from the pandemic or some because of the pandemic, some of our institutions have changed department rules or limitations. We want to make sure we hear about all of what could have impacted. In this narrative explanation of progress, you should demonstrate, have you met it and made progress toward it? And if it was not met, provide an explanation of why. And so we also just wanted to make sure that this explanation should be different from your executive summary. Just checking the chat really quick. Sarah, do you want me to go back to clarify between project and program measures?
If you want to pop back to the slide with the program measures on it.
No problem.
I'm typing it in the chat as well, but yeah, it can be a little confusing. You have 3 types of measures. So while you are tied with ACE for having the most number of required measures, you're the only grant program that has 3 types of measures. So you have GEPRA measures. Those are the ones that we showed you where if you're a teacher program, you do these numbers. If you're an administrator program, you do these numbers. You have your program measures, which are these 4, also required. Exact wording will be pre-filled in the system. So typically you'll have 4 GEPRA, the 4 program. Now, if you are a grantee who does both teacher and administrator certifications, if you're a kind of everybody program, then you'll do actually all 6 GEPRA plus your 4 program. So those are the program and the GEPRA. The project are the ones that are specific to you, that you wrote in your grant application. You decided what you were going to report on and how you were going to report it. The easiest way to go back and honestly see your project measures are to look at your previous year APRs. Because once you report on those project measures the first time in your APR, I like to say they're set in stone, because that is what puts in the wording for them. And then you actually need to keep the exact same wording for your project measures each year. So that's why it's so helpful and important to go back and look at your past APRs, because whatever project measures that are unique to your program you set, you need to keep those going forward. So GEPRA and program pre-filled, required, preset, and you'll be able to get those both in G5. We've got them here in the slide deck, but the project ones are unique to all of you. There are some of you who have 1, there's some of you who have 13. It really, really varies. But if you get in there and you're starting to do your reporting and that still doesn't make sense, just reach out to us and we can always hop on together and look at your specific ones.
Thank you. And so just wanted to review, you've heard me say APR update. And so we just wanted to talk about that September 12th deadline for your APR update. So as you saw in the previous slide, your charts that you're like, we're not going to get that information just yet. I'd put a 999. And so the APR update is an opportunity for you to update your Section A data and replace 999 with actual data. No, this will not be submitted via G6. You would submit this straight to Linda through the email. We will have more details about your APR update at upcoming talking circles. And so lobbing it back over to Alani for quiz time.
Awesome, awesome. I did want to just, okay, looks like it's being answered, a question in the chat. Awesome. So question number 5, here's our scenario. So you have a project measure, and it's great that we've kind of gone over and differentiated between the different measures. And so you have a project measure. 100% of project participants will pass the process exam by May 1st, 2024. That's the scenario. And so your quiz question should be popping up. Should the grantee indicate 999 or 0 in your APR? Okay, we got everyone completing it. Awesome. Great. Okay. Couple more adding their answers. Righty. Well, let's look at what the correct answer would be. There, and we got 100%. Great job, you guys. So everybody knew that you should be reporting 999 as it relates to this scenario. Awesome. Great job. Moving on to question number 6. So, which is not, emphasis on the word not, a good writing tip for writing your explanation of progress? So you have a couple of choices. Again, remember the word not. Keep your responses brief and to the point. B, tell the story behind your quantitative data. C, use section C for any information that won't fit in the box. And D, make sure to include an explanation of progress for all measures, even those with no data currently. So which one is not a good tip for writing your explanation of progress? I'll give you guys a couple of extra seconds to answer. Allison put in a funny chat comment. She said, questions that ask not are never good for my brain. I hear you. But I did try to emphasize the not part that you should not include. Yeah, we're keeping you on your toes. Okay. All right. All right, so let's take a look at the answer. So we kind of spread out between A, C, and D, and the correct response would have been, you do not want to keep your responses brief and to the point. You really want to share all that information. And if you do run out of space, then please feel free to use section C for any information that doesn't fit in that box. Awesome. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah for some top tips. I feel like we need some music behind these.
I would not mind that. I'm not going to sing it because I like all of you too much to make you endure that. But
right?
we'll find something for the future.
Yeah.
All right. So my top tips for Section A. Section A is the bulk of your APR report. And it's where you're going to spend the most of your time working and putting information together. So first tip is double check that work. You're working so hard on it. Double check that you have all the GEPRA measures, the appropriate 4 GEPRA measures if you're a teacher or administrator program, or all 6 measures if you do both, your 4 required program measures, and then however many unique project measures you have. Make sure you've got all of them in Section A. And go back and review those slides. You'll have this slide deck, you'll have the recording. Go back and make sure that you're reporting in the way in which you're supposed to be reporting. Second tip kind of harkens back to my comment in the chat that we love robust responses. So write your explanations of progress outside of G5. As was mentioned earlier, G5 has a tendency to be a little persnickety. And so it will often time out, and you have written this glorious explanation of progress, and now it is off in the ether. So I always suggest type those somewhere else. That also gives you an opportunity for spelling and grammar check because G5 has none of that built in. So that way you can have a nice, beautiful explanation of progress. It's saved for you, and you can just copy and paste it right on in. And then your final tip is just going to drive home again my love of a robust response. Don't slack on those explanations of progress. Quantitative data is great, and it tells a boop of your story. But the explanation of progress is all your qualitative data. It's your chance to tell the story behind the data. be a good storyteller and tell us the whole story, not just the opening sentence. So robust explanations of progress. And on we go to everybody's favorite part, the budget.
Thank you. Are there any questions about section A or explanation of progress that folks are having? No. Okay. I see a question in the chat. Are we using G5 or G6 for this APR? And so Olani, thank you. And so G5 and G6, you'll hear us using interchangeably. It's the exact same system. They are in the transition, they're in the phase of transitioning from G5 to G6, but they're the same system. You should have the same login. It should look the same. All your information should be in there. And our TA team will drop the website link in the chat again for you. It's the exact same system and they're just still transitioning. And so you'll hear some folks say G5, you'll hear some folks say G6. Beautiful. So we are halfway through. We still have a lot of really fun information for you. So moving on to section B. So we're going to continue our APR walk and we're going to go through section B, which is your budget. And so in your budget information, we have a bunch of tools to help you as well as we go through this. And so in this section, you will provide a narrative of your spending for the reporting period. This section should expand as you type into the form. But again, if there's any point in this process that you are having trouble submitting information, please you can email that information to Linda. It's best that we have the information than we don't have it and you miss the deadline. So ideally, this section is organized by budget category, and we're going to go through what that typically looks like. But here again, it'll be helpful to craft this narrative in a separate document and then copy and paste it in. And so here are just a few reminders about what you will need to report in the budget section. In your forms, you should be reporting the funds expended, even if it's not reflected yet in G5. So through the last day of the reporting period, which is February 29th. The reporting period for each grantee cohort, the reporting period is on the screen. I recommend you just writing it down, putting a sticky note, because that could be really important in the information that you provide for us. And this is why we also recommend you tracking your own expenses, because it can sometimes take a while for our offices to pass down information, to pass down the drawdown expenses as well. And so here's another tip that we want to see in your information is your drawdown frequency. We want to know how often you draw down, and if you have not drawn down, this lets us know how we can help you remedy that system and your frequency. And lastly, you want to describe any challenges you face during this reporting period. And later, we're going to talk about that you may have carryover funds or you experience budget cuts from the previous period or looking forward to the next one. And we'll talk about that too, but we want to make sure you include all of this into your budget narrative. And so we just really wanted to encourage you and to talk about that your APR is not an opportunity to look forward to and budget revision for carryover for next year. This is an update, and this is letting us know if spending has not gone as planned. So the first priority is to spend your funds, spend it down. And by this time of your reporting, of your APR reporting period, you should have spent at least 50% or more of your current budget. We want to, like I said in the previous slide, want to hear about your budget, hear about what's been happening, the transaction and expenses. But we also want you to know, and we want to hit this home, that budget revisions may be submitted at any time during your grant year. And so while we are asking you to talk about your annual performance webinar, your reporting, and talk about your budget, you do have other opportunities to talk about budget revisions. And that is like Sarah has said in the chat, this is not the same. So we encourage you to not use this time to talk about what revisions you have, but talk about what has happened. Like we said, tell the story of your budget. And if at any time you may need to make changes in your budget, like we said in the chat also, please submit that to Linda. Linda or Sarah, would you like to add anything else about the budget, maybe some things that we've seen in the past we don't want folks to do this time around?
I can give you a little fair warning that if you come in and say, we're going to carry over 80% of our budget this year, that's a red flag. You want to make sure that you are making every effort to spend down those funds as described in your grant application. And if you're hitting hiccups with spending, reach out to Linda so that she knows what's going on and can help you work through that. Don't wait until the end of July when we're getting toward the end of the year to shoot up the flare for help. Reach out now so that Linda knows what's going on and before we get those large carryover amounts. When grantees have large amounts of money remaining at the end of the year, it can often cause reductions in your budget in the following year. So they're not going to go back and cut the money you've already been awarded, but it could mean that in the next year, instead of getting the full amount, you might get less. And that can often be all the way down to even just $1. So you really want to make sure that 1, you're spending your funds, and 2, you're keeping Linda in the loop.
Awesome.
And that includes everything I was going to add. So I thank you very much for that, Sarah.
Awesome. And so let's take a look at an example of a really great budget narrative. So we can see that this narrative is categorized by the type of budget line items you may have. And so this allows for easy reading from your program officer, and it's easier for you to gather your information as well. And so you see that they have personal fringe supplies and talks about how much was drawn down and what you have spent it on, what you anticipate to spend it on. And so we highly encourage you to take this tip and kind of divide your narrative in this way as well. And so we really wanted to highlight too that at the end of this budget narrative that this program director stated that their fiscal officer conducts regular drawdowns. We want to hear that you know that you are spending down, that you have a plan for that, and there's a reviewing process. So we want to hear how your financial process is as well. And so moving on to our optional budget reporting tool. So we have provided you with tools, and this tool should be in your PD Padlet. And if it's not, please just let us know. But on the screen, you'll see that there are that there's a tool, and you'll see on the side that you'll see some categories, some areas that are already pre-filled for you to make it easier. We just want to say you are not required to use this tool. We have it for you to use for just easier access, but please understand that you are not required to use this tool. If you have your own form and your own tool, just upload that as well. And so we also wanted you to know that you will upload this optional budget tool under project narrative section B inside G6, and that is what you will see. And so as you enter your budget information in the optional budget reporting tool, please remember to only add information into the highlighted areas. We always get emails talking about how sometimes, the forms are locked. How come I can't type in this cell, but I can type in this cell? And so Sarah has created this really great tool that has calculations in there. And so some cells will be locked. And so the ones that you see on the screen are the ones that you're required, or you not required, but you can upload. And so don't panic if you're trying to type in something and the cell is locked or you can't. It's there for a reason. And so we also ask that you make sure to complete both the narrative and numeric fields. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to us and we can also help you go through this tool as well. So we have justification columns in this tool. And so when completing your section B in either the budget reporting tool or in another format, please just make sure that you are providing a narrative to describe why you have the amount in column E. And we'll show you too what the columns are and what we are referring to. We want to hear about the remaining, how you plan to spend those monies for the remainder of your current grant year. And we also have a column I, that's intended use of the remaining funds beyond the grant year. So again, here, please provide detail on where you plan to use those funds. And so before we move on to other items, we are going to quiz time.
Yay, it's quiz time again. Okay, so let's go to the question number 7. Okay.
Sorry, my computer.
Is it? Oh, there we go. And then you should also be seeing the quiz pop up for you to take a look at that. Thank you. Okay, so there's 3 questions. So the first question is, do you plan to use the optional budget reporting tool? Again, you can click yes or no. The second question is, do you need a section B budget narrative if you use the optional budget reporting tool? And then the third question, and that's a yes and no response. The third question is, do you need an optional budget reporting tool if you provide a section B budget narrative? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and see those responses. Oh, are we moving on to the next one too? Okay. The question number 8 is kind of harkens back to that slide that Doris showed with all the yellow. Which parts of this form do you actually complete and have to fill in information? Okay. Oh, looks great. So let's see, as we get these responses in. Okay, we still got some responses coming in. Awesome. So let's look at the first question. Do you plan to use the optional budget reporting tool? It looks like a lot of you are. I just want to remind you, if you choose to, again, this is an optional tool, you're not required to use it. But if you do choose to use your own tool, please remember that that tool should provide all of the same information, but maybe it's in your own format. And we'll go through a little bit more what that information is. Question number 2, do you need a budget? No, I'm going to go slow on this one. Do you need a section B budget narrative if you use the optional budget reporting tool? Most of you selected yes, and that is the correct answer. So whether or not you are using the tool or not, you still need to provide that budget narrative in section B. Okay. So number 3, do you need an optional budget reporting tool if you provide a section B budget narrative? Let me read that again. Do you need an optional budget reporting tool if you provide a section B budget narrative? Okay, so the answer here, the correct answer is yes. Again, whether it's the optional budget reporting tool or your own format, you still need to provide that breakdown budget with numbers as well as the section B budget narrative. Okay. Now we're moving on to number 4, where we get to look at the different parts of this actual optional budget reporting tool. And so, which are the columns that you must enter to complete this? And really the columns you need to be putting some number in or some information in is B, C, and D. You don't need to put anything in E because that auto calculates, and that's why that is a locked column, okay? Because we already put the calculations in, and it just makes sure that you're all good. The other columns you need to provide information in are F, G, and I. Now remember what Doris said earlier in the previous slide. F and I are narrative columns. And so those will actually be the columns where you will be providing some explanation, okay? I hope that you guys did great. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Sarah for some tips.
All right, so a few budget tips. There was a couple questions in the chat, so just to quickly hit that before I get into my tips of the day. I know it might have seemed a little confusing. Basically, those questions about like, if I use this, do I have to have this, is just highlighting that you do need to complete the budget narrative on that Ed 524 form. Remember that we kind of covered on those budget slides that that's going to talk about things like the frequency of drawdowns or infrequency, your communication with the budget office, and a few other in-depth pieces like that. The spreadsheet is giving the specific quantitative amounts and their corresponding narrative. So that's why you'll actually complete both. But if there's still questions on that, let us know in the chat. All right. So my tips for section B. The first is actually what we were discussing, which is to make sure and submit both that section B narrative with that information requested and the optional budget reporting tool so that you have both pieces of data reported. My second tip is that if you choose not to use that tool, remember all of that same info has to be submitted in another format. Typically, the things that are submitted in lieu of that do not contain all those same fields. So just be really careful with that one. And tip 3 is a reminder from back at the first tip. Let your budget office know what's going on. The second most common reason for delays in turning in APRs behind that authorized representative reason is budget office reason. I can't get the information from my budget office. They don't have it yet. Let them know literally today what you're gonna need and for what time period so that you can get that information just as soon as humanly possible so that you can get your reporting done and not be held up by other folks. So just shoot them a quick little email. And if you really want to woo them, maybe a baked good, whatever you have to do to get that budget info.
Awesome, thank you. I wanted to address, I think that there's confusion about our optional reporting budget tool. And so I see in the chat that, so Sarah is when Sarah explained, you can use the optional budget reporting tool that we have provided, or if you have one of your own. I think is that correct, Sarah? That if they don't use ours, you could use one of your own, but you must provide an additional form of it, whether it's our tool or a form you have. I just wanted to indicate that if there's any other confusion. So I know that we are getting really close to my time, 1:30, but 4:30 for folks on the East Coast. So I'm going to just speed it up a little bit because I want to respect everyone's time. And so the final section is section C, where you get to include any information that did not make it into sections A, sections B. And so you might include some photos, some student work samples, news clippings, accolades, the fun stuff that you really want us to know. This is a great section to input that information. And we also have a reporting tool to help as well. So historically, this is a section that we have encouraged you to include, because first and always, anything that does not fit in the reporting spaces elsewhere can be attached here. And so we really want to just emphasize, we want to hear about those success stories, those challenges if you've had, especially if your students have done any projects or big presentations, we'd love to see that. We love to congratulate them alongside with you. So this year we have an optional Section C reporting tool to help you gather all the important information for your program manager. So this is supposed to support your APR reporting. If you choose to not use this tool, you must submit the same information in another format. So let's unpack this just a little bit. So you can see here at the top, we want your grant information, your PR number, your project director, and then you'll move into the next section, which captures the information in the table. And so in this table, you will add the exact numbers to each of the questions for the reporting period, and also the anticipated numbers for the grant year. And then after that, you will move down to answer the 3 questions with the exact numbers, and then click on the boxes to share how you provide those services. And then just moving on more to what the this tool looks like, you will have space to answer the 9 questions listed. The first 7 questions help provide your program manager with key details about the current status of your grant period. In the last 2 questions, you will use 1 sentence to answer your greatest success and your greatest challenge. Remember, this tool is optional. However, if you choose to not use this tool, the information that is contained in this tool will need to be reflected in Section C. So we will quickly run to Olani for quiz time.
All righty, quick. Okay, so let's go to the question number 9. So this is a true or false question. Section C, the additional information section, is a place to put any information that does not fit into any of the other sections. Is that true or false? Oh, you guys are going fast. Section C should include the following information. It should include the planning period. Oh, yeah, there you go. The answer is true. Thank you. It should really, it should really include the following information: that planning period successes, success stories, challenges, or even the status of partnerships and key personnel changes. On to question number 10, question number 10. So here we go. So if you submit the Section C optional reporting tool, you must also submit a Section C narrative. Is that true or false? Or yes or no? Sorry. Okay. All right, we got everybody's answers coming in. So if you submit the Section C optional reporting tool, you must also submit a Section C narrative. The correct answer is no. Okay, so we can move on to top tips.
Yeah, so a couple of quick top tips. The first one really applies to anything you're uploading into G5. I might have mentioned G5 is a little persnickety and it loves a PDF and it hates a lot of other things. So just make sure that anything that you're going to be uploading into G5 is a PDF and you'll have a lot easier time. And you're going to upload that Section C information into Project Narrative - Section C optional tool. Second hot tip, answer each question on the tool completely but succinctly. We're not looking to make a lot of additional work for you here. We're just making sure you provide the needed information for the program. So this does not need to be paragraphs and paragraphs of answers. You can keep everything pretty short and sweet. That's why, like you'll notice with the last 2 questions, we even note just the 1 sentence because we're keeping it quick. And then finally, Remember that this is also that area for additional information, or sometimes I'll call it like the brag board. So if you have some photos that you want to share with Linda, maybe you have an article that was published about your program, or you were in a research article, or you have a chart that really beautifully illustrates something you were talking about in section A. This is the area you can do all that. Just save that all as one big PDF, and you can upload it right in and have all that other great info shared about your program too. Remember, your APR is your annual story of your program.
Thank you. So as we are wrapping up all this amazing information, we just wanted to remind you that your cover sheet in section A is already in G6, but you will need to upload the executive summary, your signed cover sheet, section B narrative, and whichever reporting tool you are using, in your section C narrative and your section C tool. And so, like we said in the beginning, that your APRs and the information you provide is really important to process all continuation awards. So please, please, please give us a lot of substantial information and progress, and make sure that you submit it on time and there's not any missing information. Okay, just important reminders as well. Please be sure to check the time that you cannot submit after 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. You will not be able to go in and revise after the reporting deadline. That is super important. We really want you all to just be mindful of that deadline, that time. And then again, if we can post a checklist back in the chat for folks, that this is a really great tool to help ensure successful and accurate reporting. And so we will go through quickly your 3 top tips. And so we just want to make sure that you are not waiting until the last minute. We encourage you today to make sure that you can log into G6 and you could submit. Please make sure that your APR is submitted on time. And if it's left in draft form, no one can see it. And then also, and lastly, want to leave you with to take your time and tell your story. This is your one opportunity to share about your program on a grand scale each year. We always say, data is storytelling. Let us hear about your stories, hear about your communities, your successes. And so we hope that these tips help you stay on top of that as well. Sarah, have I missed anything from the last few slides?
No, the only thing that I'll drive home just a little bit more is once you think you've submitted your APR, log out of G5, log back in and see if next to the APR report, it says submitted with a date and time. If it doesn't, it was not submitted. Every year I have a handful of folks who really did get everything done and they thought they submitted, but it stayed in G5 in draft form. So log completely out, log completely back in, and see if it has submitted with a date and time next to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so we're going to go through some reminders and really quickly some upcoming events for you all. And so you will see a poll launching on your screen soon to answer some questions and ask for candid feedback about today, because this will help us shape future APR webinars for you folks as well. So that poll will be coming up for you shortly. And as you are answering that poll, again, we just wanted to drive home the time that APRs must be submitted before this time. We want to make sure that you are able to submit and really tell us everything that's going on. A pro tip is to back up the date at least a week before, so that you have time to get the signatures, review anything, and add any information. And just so some events, some reminders that we are still accepting submissions for our student artist competition, and we will drop that link in the chat. This year our theme is my native language. Excuse me. So if you have any great students in your life, in your community, in your programs, and your student teaching components of your program, please share. We want to make sure that we are getting as many submissions so we can really see the artwork of our communities. And most importantly, if you have not registered for your PD meeting that is happening next week, please do so. We want to make sure that you are there. Please note that product directors are required to attend. And because this is virtual, you can invite your entire team. We have great content, amazing speakers. You're going to love the keynotes. You're going to love all the information, and a really fun platform that you can truly feel like you're at a conference. So please take the time to register for that. We are starting hot and ready on Tuesday next week, and so we hope to see you all there. Again, if there are any updates to your contact information, please let us know. Please send that to oie@sciservices.com, and to include your name, your role, and your email address. Again, as you are going through this APR, if you would like to connect with us, your OIE technical assistance team, to go through any information with you, to go through the tools with you, to make sure that you are understanding the project status charts accurately, please feel free to schedule a time with us. You can have a one-on-one session or an hour session. Please take advantage of that resource. We are so happy to help you, and it's so fun to meet with you all and get to talk to you. Lastly, we wanted to drop in and make sure you guys had upcoming dates for your talking circles, your PD talking circles, and other program. We have an all program talking circle aside from your PD talking circle. So if you really miss us and want to see us twice in 1 month, feel free to come to that one as well. And so lastly, thank you guys so much for letting us go over your time today. We just wanted to thank you so much for coming. We know that there are some few changes in the system this year. And again, if these changes are just a bit more confusing, you want to sit down with us, please reach out to us. We have Linda's email, we have our X, formerly known as Twitter, and we have our email address. And so we just really want to thank you this time. Thank you guys for all coming with us. Thank you, Linda and Sarah and Nolani, for your great help today during this webinar. And if there aren't any other last questions, we wish you guys a really fun day, a safe day, and like Sarah said, happy reporting.